So I'm halfway across the world today, and it's got me thinking about why community matters so much when it comes to yoga practice. I think that one of the things I love to do when I travel around is go to different yoga studios. So I'm in Brussels right now, and I went to a yoga class last night, and nobody at the studio was talking to each other before or after class. It was very informal, and it was a great practice. And I'll tell you, it's interesting because it's very different from Cambio, where community is such a robust, like abundant, bold aspect of the practice, where like you kind of can't walk in without like somebody talking to you sometimes, and for good or for bad. Sometimes you don't want it, but you probably need it anyway, just to somebody to say hi, check in on you, see how you're doing. But I'll say, even without the opportunity to chat with people, to get to share names and any of that, just being in community, being around people when there's energy, it just changes the flavor of the practice so much. It makes you work so much harder than you would on your own. It makes you inspired, it makes you accountable at a whole other level. And it's not to say that I don't love practice on my own. I do love home practice. I get deep in ways that I can't get what I get out of a home practice anywhere else. But that's something that I only established later on in my practice. The things that got me connected to community through yoga were the things that kept me coming back. And it's something I learned early on, that when you show up in that space, and that's what got me falling in love with yoga. I was like, who are all these shiny people, and whatever they're doing makes them look so happy, and I want some of that. So I realized over the course of like a decade what that is, and it's unique to something you have to cultivate in a yoga community. It's not something that just happens and you take for granted. What I find that we've established, co-created at Cambio is a community where people show up as their best selves, and you assume that others are showing up as their best selves, and you give them the benefit of the doubt that that is their best self. And that's not to say like good vibes only, right? Like you can be a mess, you can be real and authentic with your shadow or the dark side of yourself, the messy side of yourself. And in fact, that's why community can be so powerful, because it can hold you in ways that you can't otherwise. It brings out what needs to be brought to the surface. So in Sanskrit, there's these two terms. There's Sangha, which is particularly refers to like the spiritual community that is endeavored to a kind of a similar process, or a group of people who are on a like-minded spiritual endeavor. So that's like more of an integrated, deeper context of community. That's like something you will find in like a teacher training, a Sangha. And the other term that comes more from a Buddhist world is Kula, but that's more of like the community at large. And still, that's kind of where we do find ourselves in the yoga studio, is where we may not, like last night at the studio in Brussels, I didn't know anybody's name. I never said hello to any of them, but I could feel their presence, I could feel their energy, and it enhanced and held my practice in a way that otherwise definitely would not have created the visceral experience that it was. It's always unique, it's always different, yet there's always something significant in the way that the community impacts the experience. So it's an interesting kind of paradox because yoga is a personal journey, and I think at kind of the highest heights of yoga, we think of somebody turning ultimately inward and away from everything else. But you could make a strong argument that the world doesn't need yogis to go up and out, as it's sometimes referred to go out into the mountains, to go reject society, to go do their practice and serve only themselves. In many ways, yoga is calling us now to be in community in ways where we are living with the yamas and the yamas off the mat, where we're advocating for social justice, where we are being role models of what the philosophy of the practice espouses. So in this sense, it's like the union of yoga is not so much in these stages a question of you connecting to the divine, but you connecting to the divine through relationship and through conversation and through that horizon of communion with others. And that's what ultimately inspires the invitation to come further into conversation, to allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to be seen, to see others. And it's an interesting dynamic when we're vulnerable and allowing ourselves to be seen. It's such a generous space to give to others because it's not one of shutting down, it's not one of fear, it's not one of embarrassment, even though it might be intense and feel almost embarrassing or exhausting or like an energy expenditure to put yourself out there. But this is the way that we learn about ourselves. We can only learn about ourselves through the mirror and reflection of other. Just the same way that we're in a yoga practice and we see, I remember the first time I ever saw somebody do something fancy in a yoga class and I was like, that was amazing. I didn't know human body could do that. That's really cool. I want to do that. Those things aren't necessarily what inspire me in a yoga practice anymore. In fact, about 10 years into the practice, I remember that inspiration of examples shifted from the person in the corner doing handstand, or excuse me, usually in the front of the room, to the person at the end of class in that state of just kind of bliss with himself. And that was something I wanted to understand better and more. And it's interesting because I'll often find myself ending a yoga practice at the studio, staying longer than most people in Shavasana, and usually being the last one to leave the room. So I'm there in Shavasana while all the hustle and bustle, everybody's rummaging around, getting their mat rolled up, getting their things together, putting their props up, dropping their water bottles, shaking their keys. And that becomes a practice. And it's interesting because that stuff used to really disturb my inner peace. And I think that early stage of the practice, my inner peace was just that much more fragile. And now there's contentment, there's gratitude in the relationship to other, even when I don't speak to somebody, even when I don't know them. It's just really comforting for me to know that other people are practicing yoga, getting what they want, getting what they need out of it. In fact, I just want people to be practicing yoga. Whether it's goat yoga, beer yoga, yoga at another studio, I'd rather people practice yoga than not practice yoga. The pain of existence is not one that we experience in isolation or need to experience alone. And in fact, very often, just being able to put ourselves out into the world, to be able to get out of our comfort zone, to share space with a stranger, to be challenged by the person whose body odor or chewing gum distracts you, or the person whose asana practice inspires you, or their ujjayi breath helps guide you. I hope we'll see you on the mat in community. And if you've got ideas around the ways in which practicing in community, practicing socially has enhanced your practice that weren't mentioned in this video today, pop them down into the comments. Give us a like, give us a share. We appreciate it. Just a quick recap. 5 top reasons practicing in a studio matters and enhances your practice. Let's run them down. Number 1, shared energy gets amplified in the experience. So when you practice around other people, for whatever reason, it's just like the Buddha said about the candle. Lighting another person's candle doesn't take anything away from your flame. It just makes everything that much more illuminated. Same thing when you practice. The energy is just there. Inspiration through witnessing others. So this is the same kind of thing that functions in recovery programs, makes them work so good. On one hand, you have people who inspire you and give you role modeling of what to aspire to. And then there's other people that remind you of where you maybe once were. And it is a good reminder to be content with all the work that you've done in your practice, that you've earned your place in that space. Opportunity for authentic connection in an otherwise isolated world. Probably more important now than ever, especially after how COVID has damaged our social fabric so much. Getting off your couch, out of your comfort zone, out of the way of screens, into the flesh world, into greeting people, meeting people, saying hi, and just staying present in a space. Letting it be awkward. There is nothing wrong with things being awkward. And I think there is so much to be learned from just wondering with a little bit of curiosity, what happens after the awkward moment? If it doesn't kill you, yes, it does make you stronger. Accountability and rhythm. So having a specific schedule, having a time that you are accountable to being there, to showing up, and in relationship with people who kind of grow to expect you. You're going to create a certain momentum with that, a certain rhythm with that. And especially when you do that over a period of time, people get to know you in ways where that accountability becomes like a currency. It becomes fluid. It becomes something that keeps you going. It gives you energy. It makes you feel like you are progressing in your practice. It makes you feel like you're accomplishing something, but probably more than anything, it just makes you feel seen and witnessed. And the top thing probably is relationship. Just creating relationship within community, because that ends up boiling over or flowing over into support off the mat. So not only do you get all these things from showing up at a studio, but you get connection with people in ways that is astounding. So those are the top 5.